Yeah, welcome everyone to our first online interview for this format, the Online Echo. I'm Carlotta, this is Zarina, and we're really happy that you're all here from around the world. And of course, welcome Christian Felber. Hi.
Hi, everybody. Happy to give this lecture and have to talk afterwards with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you. But before we start, we want to give all of you a tiny bit more details about what Christoph is and the Online Echo. Christoph, you can see it behind us, is short for Greifswald International Students Festival, and it's the name of our non-profit organization here in Greifswald in the northeast of Germany. It's our aim with our organization to enrich our city's cultural diversity, and we foster intercultural understanding. To do this, we organize a biannual thematic festival, the Christoph. And with the festival, we want to connect students from all over the world in dialogue beyond their nationalities or religions, and we invite them to come to Greifswald for 1 week to have discussions and join events. And we want to provide, therefore, a platform for exchanging ideas and opinions and discuss current relevant topics.
Yeah, and because as you see at the moment, this is sadly not possible. And we thought we'd try something online instead and came up with the idea of this Online Echo blog, where we're really happy that a lot of people seem to be interested in joining us in discussion. And the topic for this year should have been From Ego to Echo, creating ideas for collective change. And we'll keep keeping this topic, and it's important to us to still talk about it. Because we think our world deserves better. It develops better than climate change or global injustice. And for that, we want people to come together and exchange their ideas still. And our Online Echo will be a platform where we will have texts from our participants, from ourselves, from input lecturers, from teamers, and also videos like this one. And we're super excited and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and we are happy to have Christian here as our guest, and that he will share some of his ideas. Christian is a multiple book author from Austria and an activist. He was one of the founding members of ATTAC in his country in the year 2000, and in 2010 initiated the economy of the common good, which is what he will also present now. The movement is today active in some 30 countries around the world, and we are really happy that you will now share your idea personally and also afterwards have agreed to answer some of our questions.
Yeah, thank you. The pleasure is all mine. And I'm happy that in this format it is possible to reach to a more international audience. So the crisis has also some positive sides. Yeah, the crisis is inspiring many people to think about the system, and there was already a debate on a possible or necessary system change before the COVID-19 crisis, climate change, but also loss of biodiversity and other social and ecological problems have been increasing before the COVID-19 crisis and had fueled a broad debate on a possible system change. And the economy for the common good would be, at least in our view, alternative economic system. And in order to be a little bit more precise, what is the system and what is a system change, I would like to start my presentation with these questions. My input lecture will be based on 3 books, 3 books on the economic system, the financial system, and the international trade order. Here you already have a first idea what's the system about, and the scientific background of all that, which is a book which is only in German. It's about economic science. It's a call for revolution in economic science. Said that, here is already the question, what is system change and what are we talking about if we talk about the system? it's a very complex phenomenon with many aspects. And I think that at the bottom of every system is a range of values, or even a value system. And there is no economy and no idea about economy, meaning no economic science, without a value system that is underlying that idea about the economy, that science about the economy, or that economic practice, or that political regulation of the economy. Maybe I directly jump to the scientific paradigm, because this is the biggest part of the problem today. Although there are 15 theoretical schools of economic science, only one, the so-called neoclassical economic science, is almost totally dominating all over the world in business schools and economic faculties of universities, and it's absolutely dominating in economic education. Although there is ecological economics, feminist economics, Marxist economics, historical economics, or institutional theories, the neoclassical paradigm is absolutely dominating, and it's saying about itself that it's value free. And this is a very big betray. It's a self-betrayal, and it's a betrayal of the audience, because, as said, every science on the economy is inherently bearing a value system. There has been research which is the value system of the today dominating neoclassical economic science. It's a combination of maximization of self-interest, competition, pursuit of financial goals, materialism or consumerism, and growth. These 5 values are very characteristic of the neoclassical scientific economic paradigm, and as a consequence of its political implementation, which we used to call neoliberalism, or neoliberal policies. Of course, in between the value system and the scientific paradigm, there is a narrative. And the current narrative could be summed up with that the economy is about markets. Markets regulate themselves. They are efficient, and markets are considered as something free. And this is the base of their efficiency. This is nothing but a story or a narrative, but it's a necessary facet of the whole mosaic of the system. And if there is a scientific paradigm with a narrative that inherently is based on a value system, then policymakers can implement this story, this seemingly scientific approach into policies and a legal framework. And this is in red, because I think that from all aspects of what is the system, the legal framework is the most important one. I will give some arguments for that later on. But the economy for the common good is especially focusing on the narrative and the new value system, and as a consequence of that, a change of the legal framework of the economy. By the way, the value system of the economy for the common good, I already can tell it. It's a combination of fundamental values, which are considered both as relational values, which allow not only human relationships to flourish, but also relationships between humanity and the planet. Or from a different point of view, from a point of view of political science, these are democratic values which are already anchored in our constitutions, such as human dignity, solidarity, justice, sustainability, or democracy. And if you compare these 5 values with the ones that I mentioned before, then you see there is no correspondence at all. These are completely different value systems. And this is the core of the current problem in my analysis. Neoclassical economics and neoliberal policies, as their outflow, are based on an opposed value system, than what people would consider as healthy, as normal, as helpful for building up social subsystems, from the economy to democracy, from education to science. Said that, if the legal framework is established once, well, corresponding institutions are built, and they direct the behavior of economic actors in one direction or another. So how we behave is not so much a consequence of human nature, but very much a consequence of the legal framework of the economy and the political institutions that we build to implement these legal frameworks. Also, market forces are not natural phenomenon. They are a consequence of the market design. Depending on how we design markets, market forces foster greed or solidarity and cooperation. It's up to us how we want to design the economy. And one major stage of economic activities, but not the only one, of course, because there are also commons, there are also public goods, there are also self-sufficient households and farms, and there are markets. But the economy for the common good, in a kind of division of labor, is focusing its reform efforts on markets. And that's why we try to raise awareness that markets are not a natural phenomenon, which is something what neoclassical economists make us believe, but they are 100% designed and built by humans, and they can work in the direction we want them to work. Yeah, and private organizations, last one, same here. Private organizations can be dangerous and greedy and destructive, behaving as capitalistic institutions, but they can also be all the opposite. They can be environmental friendly and protecting, they can be caring, they can be common good orientated and contributing to the increase of the common good, depending on how we define them, how we understand them, which we consider their goals. Neoclassical economic textbooks tell us that the definition of a company is an organization that is striving for the maximization of financial profit. To me, that's nothing but a perversion, but it's what neoclassical standard textbooks tell us. And of course, there are alternatives. We can define, understand, and set up organizations and economic organizations completely different, as I just said. And I just want to raise awareness that a system is implying all these aspects, but I will focus on the legal framework, because I think of all these aspects, it's the key aspect. And if we want to really achieve a system change, we have to try to change the legal fundament and the legal framework of the economy. If we look at from this point of view, there are many alternatives, which is very good news, but many of them are not about system change. And this is nothing bad. We should just be aware of that. Because if some alternatives are very attractive and inspire or make even many people enthusiastic, sooner or later, these people will wake up when they understand that these alternatives do nothing about changing the legal fundament and framework of the economy. So these are all friends of the economy for the common good, but there are no system changes. And I think this is a very critical point for discussion, to distinguish those alternatives which really go for changing the legal system and others which don't. And looking at the legal system from a different point of view, here I offer a chart which tries to make visible the most important ideas of an economic order. The word order already implies that's a kind of political or legal. Politics is about laws, is about legal rules. And if we ask which is the current dominant economic order, then my answer is that, well, some still are talking about the social market economy at least in Europe. We started in Europe, so maybe I'm not talking about the whole world, but I'm talking about the member countries of the European Union. It's a social market economy, but which is tendentially developing towards a more rough and pure capitalism. And the debate was ever since that if you criticize capitalism, you're a socialist. There's nothing in between. You can see an important saying from Ludwig von Mises. He was the scientific mentor of Friedrich August von Hayek. And Friedrich August von Hayek was the scientific mentor of Milton Friedman. And they tried to eliminate thinking freely about alternatives to these extremes, socialism and capitalism. I call them extremes because they do not integrate the individual and the collective dimension of human beings, but they say either one of the two is absolutely right and the other one is absolutely wrong. That's why capitalism opts for private property only and for markets only, whereas socialism opts for collective property only and the state or collective organization only. Whereas the economy for the common good has a moderate position in between. We say that there is nothing wrong principally about private property, but it should not be the only form of property, and there should be both conditions, common good orientation of private property, and limits. Nobody and no legal person should become too big and too powerful. This is why we are quite far from capitalism, but we are as far from pure socialism, although we say, of course, collective property is principally as right as private property, but not every property should be collective. It's just one different form and it should have its limits. It should not make up 100% of property, and it should also be conditioned. Also collective property must not destroy our common good, which are first and foremost the planetary ecosystems. That's why economy for the common good is also in green, because both capitalism and state socialism have proven to be able to destroy the foundations of life. Said that, the economy for the common good proposes 20 cornerstones which would reform the legal fundament of the economy, and everyone and each of them would fill 2 hours. That's why I just show you the overview, how complex and how complete the proposal of the economy for the common good is. We consider ourselves a holistic alternative, which means that we have a theory of change, which is consisting of many elements, but we are also a lively movement, currently with 4,000 volunteers in 30 countries on all continents that are trying to spread the word, but especially to implement the ideas in companies, in cities, and in universities or schools. And third, we gave a deep thought on implementation, as even in the best developed democracies on the planet, these very same democracies are currently in a deep crisis. We are talking about post-democracy or rollback of fundamental rights. We make a proposal of a better, a deeper, a more real economy, as they say in Spain, and we call this concept a sovereign democracy. I will talk about it in a few minutes. Let's start with the model. A holistic view also of the economy asks first, which are the contexts in space, in time, and in meaning. And in our view, the economy is not something self-organizing or independent from other areas. It's deeply embedded in human societies that have their values and that should have their democratic rules that should steer and also hold true for the economy. So in an economy for the common good, it would not be possible that that constitutions say dignity, solidarity, sustainability, justice and democracy, and then in economic textbooks we learn egoism and competition and growth and financial indicators. That's a contradiction that doesn't make sense. There must be a clarification in which societies we live. And also the broader context, the ecosystems are regarded in an economy, in a holistic economy for the common good, as the fundament of life, and as a consequence, as the fundament of the economy. So if there are limits in the planetary ecosystems, these limits have also to be the limits for the economy. That's the beginning of thinking about economic topics, and then the start of shaping and designing political economic activities. As a consequence of this holistic picture, we think that the common good should be the overarching goal of all economic activities. And this is a very different story from economic education that teaches that the economy is about making money. This is very sadly a fact in worldwide economic education, and it's a very strong contradiction. Is it about the common good, or is it about making money? And luckily, well, let's see, Aristotle already made a distinction of these two possibilities to understand and then to practice the economy by two different terms. He said the original oikonomia, which gives the name for an economy and also for economic science, for economics, is about the well-being of all household members. Oikos, the house. Nomos, by the way, are the moral rules, thanks to which we manage the house in order to achieve a specific goal, which is the well-being of all household members, the common good. And in this idea of the economy, money is playing a role, but it's just a means to help achieve the goal, which is the common good. And if this relationship of goal and means flips around and money turns into the goal of economic activities, then Aristotle said this is not an oikonomia, this is not an economy anymore. This is a perversion of the economy into its opposite, into chrematistike. It's an ancient Greek word. It means literally the art of making money and accumulating capital and getting rich. Today we call it capitalism. So Aristotle's message is that capitalism and economy are oppositions. And that's a lucid message, but it's absolutely forgotten and actually has been rotten out in economic education, because it's also bare of the time context. There is less and less history, both economic history and history of economic thought in economic education nowadays, which is another criticism. And back to the present, the democratic constitutions had this choice. Do we want to have a capitalistic order or an economic order? And as you can see, all of them have opted for an economic order, which means against a capitalistic order. Because if we would like to have a capitalistic order, then the constitutions would say the economic activity in its entirety serves the accumulation of capital. That's a crematistic or a capitalistic order. But constitutions don't say that. They say that the goal of economic activities is the common good. These are truly economic orders. And capital is nothing bad, but it is very clearly not the goal, but just a means. That's in our constitutions. And why is that so important? That's so important not only because I like to remember of Aristotle, it's even more important because today we use to measure success not according to the achievement of the goal, which would be the correct way to measure success, but we used to measure success according the availability or even the accumulation of means. And this is, from a methodological point of view, wrong, because in all projects, endeavors, enterprises, or fields of life, everywhere we measure success according to the achievement of the goals. And as you can see here, the unit of measurement of GDP, financial profit, or return on investment, which are the most widely used success indicators in the economy today, we are not measuring the achievement of the goal. We are measuring the availability of means. And that's just wrong. If the goal is the common good, as constitutions say, the legitimation comes from the constitutions, not from Aristotle. From Aristotle comes moral legitimation, but the democratic legitimation comes from constitutions. And if they tell us that the economy is about the creation and the increase of the common good, then we would have to measure economic success according to the achievement of that goal, and not first and foremost, how many means do we have at hand. This is also important to know, but this is not about success measurement, first and foremost. So how would we propose to create a common good product? We already have the Better Life Index, the Happy Planet Index, the Sustainable Development Goals, or the one which I favor is the Gross National Happiness of Bhutan. So there is also already a mega trend that we shift away from GDP, but it's a very fierce battle between those who still defend GDP. For instance, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations are 17, which is already by far better than just one goal. But still in goal 8, the GDP growth is included. So this is a very nice symptom of this fierce battle that some economists and politicians cannot let go GDP. Our proposal is to let the people decide and compose democratical, from the bottom, common good product. And they can get inspired by the SDGs and the gross national happiness and all others, but they should decide. And the process could be that in local assemblies, people could make 100, 200, 300 proposals, which should be the most relevant elements of a common good product. But in the end, we select only 20 sub-goals, let's say, the most relevant ones. And they would be operationalized with 2 or 3 indicators, and then we can measure quantitatively, not in monetary terms, but quantitatively, the common good product of each democratic society. Theoretically, every country could have a different, because democratically composed, common good product, but as experience shows and as scientific evidence shows, it's very likely that people who are humans, and humans are the same humans in the South of America, China, and Central Europe, they will very probably come to very similar, if not identical outcomes. That's not necessary. There's no problem if there are different common good products, but I'm quite optimistic that these common good products will look very much alike in diverse countries, because it's about fundamental values. And one major function of fundamental values is to protect the fulfillment of basic needs. And needs are not similar amongst humans, but they're identical because we belong to the same species. So it's a good message. As for the assumed difficulty that different cultures would come to different outcomes. The common good balance sheet for companies could be a logical derivative of the common good product. As we do not have at the moment a common good product, well, what we did in the common good balance sheet for companies that already exists and has been applied by 700 companies and other organizations so far, we looked up in democratic constitutions which are actually the existing fundamental and constitutional values. And we found human dignity, solidarity and justice, environmental sustainability and transparency and co-determination, let's say democracy. And what the common good balance sheet does is it measures how consequently, to which degree an organization lives these values according to all of its stakeholders, from suppliers to future generations. And in the fields of intersections, we defined 20 common good topics. For instance, human dignity in the working place. Then we differentiate them in several aspects. Let's say safety and health at the working place, experience of meaning in the working place, participation in the working place, and a fair wage and distribution in the working place, just for instance. And then in these aspects, we define that an organization can achieve 4 steps: first step, second, third, and fourth step. And it can also have a negative achievement because if human rights are violated in the supply chain, then this is not 0 points, but this is minus 100 or even 200 points. So this is the methodology of the common good balance sheet. The result would be measured in points, not in monetary terms, and it should be made visible on the products, on all products of that corresponding company. We hope to have this label ready by the end of the year. And this would give consumers not only a more informed choice and a more rational choice as a consequence, because they could easily scan with their mobile phones on the QR code of every product and look up every ethical detail that they're interested in. But it would furthermore give lawmakers the basis for apply a differentiated treatment on these different companies. Today, a company that takes care of the employees, pays a fair wage, applies the best available ecological standards, protects the climate, has higher costs than companies who don't, who decide to externalize all these costs and roll them over to either other countries or future generations or the public. And they have today a competitive advantage. And this is another perversion in our view, which we would like to correct in order that the dumpers in all disciplines would offer their products at higher prices than those who protect the global climate and fulfill with our fundamental values. And then it will be only a question of time when the most climate friendly, the most caring, the most cooperative, and the most democratic organizations will remain in the markets, and the others either change or have to leave. How do we achieve this? Well, linking the common good balance sheet to incentives that already exist, from taxes to tariffs to market access, from priority in public procurement to economic promotion, from research and development projects to other incentives. Maybe give you one example. The city of Portland in the United States is taxing companies in which inequality is getting very high with an additional corporate profit tax of 10%. And if it's getting excessive, they pay an additional 25% of corporate profit tax. That would be considered an applied economy for the common good. Time is running out, so maybe I try to come to an end, although I have many more slides prepared. This is already the summary of the economy for the common good. As said, there are many alternatives, from circular economy to social and solidarity economy to donuts economy to blue economy and others. We focus on markets because at the moment it's the main stage of economic activities. As said, not the only one, but the main stage. And we would like to reform this main stage of economic activities in the meaning that we shifted from profit maximization and competition, acting against each other, to cooperation, acting with one another, and increasing the common good as the new bottom line or overarching objective of all economic activities. Well, how exactly it would work that we switch from competition, actually counterpetition, it's more correct, to a true competition, which literally in Latin would mean to search together. Whereas if companies act one against the other, in correct Latin, that would be expressed as counterpetition. And we would, in a nutshell, disincentivize acting against each other and incentivize acting with each other and be solidary. This is about market design. There is no natural law that obliges companies to cannibalize each other. It's about incentives and design, and we can design markets as serving the common good. Yes, of course, we would have to lay off Homo economicus from economic education as well, or remember what it originally meant. Because if we look up what the ancient Greeks were thinking about economic values, it was about caretaking, sufficiency, and cooperation. Actually, all the contrary of what Homo economicus stands for today. And for that, it's interesting to know that Homo economicus only was born in a male brain in 1888, and none of his characteristics is natural, as much as economists affirm that. But we have scientific proof that humans do not behave like economic teachers tell us or characterize Homo economicus. We are different and we behave differently. Yes. How can I come to a conclusion? Maybe with the last example. This is the proposal to limit inequality. The economy for the common good, one of our 20 cornerstones is to allow inequality to a certain degree, but limit it. And for this, we propose to give the people the right to vote on fundamental questions, like, for instance, the limitation of inequality in income. And if we ask people so far in 25 countries where they would limit inequality between the highest and the lowest incomes, and give them the possibility to make many, many proposals, and then vote upon all these proposals, this is 4 times, this is 15 times, and then measure the resistance against all these proposals. And the proposal that meets the least resistance here, it's the proposal with 8 times between the highest and the lowest incomes, would be the winner. And with a higher inequality, the resistance would again grow. Then the people would vote for a factor 8, or for a factor 10, or for a factor 5. These are very usual outcomes. And if you compare these outcomes of democratic votings from reality, we see that governments and parliaments, they prefer to conserve an inequality of 900 times or even 360,000 times in USA. And we think this is a very nice example of post-democracy. Formally, our democracies work, but the outcomes are not, do not correspond with people's will and values. And that's why we would give more decision power to the people. Yes, I jump over my second example. That's about trade policy. My third example would be ecological human rights. Maybe we get back to that in the debate. but the essence is that people would take fundamental decisions on economic policy in a much more social and in a much more ecological way. They would create something like an economy for the common good if they had the decision power. And my input finishes with inviting you. Oh my God, I had so many slides. I was not aware of that. I invite you to join the movement as an individual. You can found a local chapter where you live. You can make a balance sheet for your company. You can convert your municipality or city in a common good city, organizing a democratic assembly in which you create your own local common good product. Or you could help to reform economic institutions and teach different kind of economics. All this you can do, and more people are joining this movement and enhance you to make your contribution. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christian, for your very interesting presentation, even though we had to cut it short, but I'm sure everyone can read further on the website you're displaying or in your books. And of course, we're talking now. Thank you for that presentation. I really enjoy how I feel like I've just participated in a lecture on ecology, and at the same time, I feel super empowered to continue being an activist and doing something for a change. Thank you for providing tools, ideas of tools, and for the great bridge you did from your speak to our festival topic, which is from ego to echo, creating ideas for collective change. It's all about this. How do I change my own behavior so that collectively we can achieve better? And yeah, so my first question would be, maybe you can tell us the story how you became an activist. What inspired you? What was that one moment?
Sure. There were many steps in this journey and milestones, but maybe the last one was that I became more and more aware of that value systems contradiction. In the economy, we were talking about efficiency and competitiveness and GDP growth and return on investment and high frequency trade. And my sensation was that this is not only different, this is contradictory to what we are listening in all other fields of life and what is enshrined in our constitutions. This has nothing to do with human dignity. This has nothing to do with solidarity and justice and sustainability, the protection of the planetary ecosystems, the climate and biodiversity. It has nothing at all to do with democracy and equal opportunities and gender equality. So how come this contradiction of so many values? Because it's not one, it's not a single, it's a systemic contradiction. And that's why I digged very deeply into the fundament, the skeleton of the current economic system. And there I found that actually it's all about the inversion of goal and means. Because if capital and its was just the means, then we can use it or not. We can use it more efficiently or less efficiently. Companies can compete or cooperate. But because everything is about different goals, the question of all economists would be, how can we increase human dignity? How can we increase justice? How can we increase sustainability and stabilize biodiversity? But if capital turns into the goal, then they pose different kind of questions. How can we increase capital? Make this more efficiently? How can innovations make capital increase? And how can capital machines become more competitive towards other capital maximization machines? So the whole story changes if we switch from a true and original oikonomia to its perversion, a schematistike or capitalism. But for that, we first have to understand that economy and capitalism are opposites, and economists prevented us from that insight, which is already Aristotle's insight, saying the only opposition to capitalism is socialism. and that was a party killer in the meaning that the party of thinking about alternatives to capitalism, which are not socialism, was stopped for a long time in economic science. And I did not rest until finding this root of so many problems. And I maybe skipped the other points because this is just the last point of my journey, but it was the decisive point to create the economy for the common good.
Yeah. I really think it's really fascinating how you had first started with yourself and then had these big ideas. To me, I think they're super fascinating, but they're also a little abstract sometimes. And I think, or I can imagine it would be the same for a lot of our listeners or viewers. So can you maybe give us an example of what a company could do? You said the spreadsheets, but what do these people do that support your movement, these companies, these individual people?
Maybe the individuals.
Mm-hmm. So the question is what individuals can do and what companies can do, are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, let's start with the individuals. We first we invite all individuals to join our local chapters. So far it's 200, which is not that many, but in most countries the movement has not arrived yet. We have just learned that in 7 African countries the movement is starting with a different, with the name Economy for the Common Good, but also with an African name that's called MAAT. And MAAT is for an African philosophy that also gave birth to Ubuntu, by the way. And so we combine MAAT and Economy for the Common Good in order to respect the African cultural traditions. Same with Buen Vivir in Latin America, or national happiness in Bhutan, for instance. But everywhere where local chapters exist, people can just join them and work with companies, with other organizations, with the municipality or city, or with schools and universities. Even one step before, we have a so-called auto test. So this is just for your inner work. You can ask yourself, what is my definition of dignity, and how did I behave today according to this value? Or to solidarity. Am I behaving solidarily, or am I competing today? What about sustainability? This is a reflection about my lifestyle. Do I buy local products from organic farming, or from solidary farming even? Or where do get the food which I'm eating today? This is the first step. The most ambitious step would be to organize in your country a democratic assembly on economy, which gives citizens the rights to take these fundamental decisions on the trade order, on the financial system, on the economic system. But in this range, you can do very tiny steps today, and maybe by far more ambitious steps in 10 years. The movement is laid out for many decades. It's nothing simple and nothing short-termed. It's a deep structural change. It's a true system change. And when first women started to fight for equal rights, I think it was clear to them that this would not be about a few years.
Yeah,
and companies. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could share my slides again if
no, maybe you
I'll just tell you.
The 2 Americas, or you said Latin America, but when we looked at the website of the Economy of the Common Good, we also noticed that among the participating countries so far, a lot of them are in South and Latin America, and we were wondering, do you have any explanation or idea why the idea is more popular maybe, or more known there?
I think it's just because I'm speaking Spanish fluently. No, it's a joke.
That's where the advertising started.
Yeah, I studied Spanish, but no, I think the serious reason is because the mindset our philosophy in Latin America is not capitalistic. It has never been. It has always been taking care of the common good. I once, in a visit to Colombia, I met people from the indigenous tribes, and they came to the presentation of the economy for the common good, and afterwards they approached me and they were laughing and said, "Oh, nice, Christian, what you told us, but actually we have no different understanding from the economy than being common good oriented. So it's nothing new to us, it's the only thing we know." And possibly this does not hold true for the rich post-colonial oligarchical elites in Latin America, but it does hold true for majorities of the citizens. Although not everybody is remembering Buen Vivir. This also one has to say clearly. It's a very attractive philosophy, but it's not very well known in the largest parts of the populations of Latin American countries.
Yeah.
And companies, shall we still talk about companies?
Regarding the time, I think maybe we
Yes.
stick to companies, because I think most of our listeners aren't yet company owners or
Still individuals.
still very individual. But I think if people are interested, definitely read up on it. I think you have a lot of that in your books as well. So there's definitely sources what you could do when you have a company that you want to reform. I want to quickly draw away or change the topic a little bit, because I mean, we're talking through a screen today because of a pandemic that is hitting us worldwide. It's quite a crisis that everyone is affected by. And I was wondering, and it's affecting the economy a lot. It's affecting the economy everywhere. And I was wondering what could be different with an economy of the common good. What changes would we see in our way at the moment, our situation?
Mm. Well, maybe two things. First and foremost, an economy for the common good implemented would prevent what happened. What happened was a jump over from a virus that is usually living only in wild animals to humans, a so-called zoonosis, even more precise, a zooanthroponosis. This is when a virus jumps from animals to humans. In the other direction, it would be an anthropozoonosis, but this was an zooanthroponosis because it was the other way around. And why do, in recent times, more and more viruses jump over? Because the pressure on their habitats is increasing on behalf of humans. For instance, the famous bats that give the virus to other animals and then to humans, or directly. In the case of Ebola, it was directly from bats to humans. Also, AIDS is another example, SARS and MERS. Bats are usually not contagious, but if they are stressed, then they become by far more contagious, and then they pass on the virus to other animals or directly to humans. And why are they getting stressed? Deforestation, chasing animals, pollution and contamination of the air, or through light or electromagnetic smogs. So we are increasing pressure on the living spaces of animals in many dimensions. And the more we do that, the higher is the probability that these viruses jump over. So if we really protected biodiversity and the planetary ecosystems, we would just prevent these zoonoses and not have any problem. But the shutdown and the lockdown, they give us the opportunity to experience a different lifestyle and to think over the question, could we live with less? And I think we have seen that it's very possible and not such a disaster, at least in richer countries, because we have not learned yet about the consequences in the poorer countries. I have heard that the World Labour Organization has said that 1.7 billion persons are going risk of hunger because they work in the so-called informal sector, and if they cannot go to work, they have nothing to eat. So we will have to see if they have any opportunity to reflect on philosophical issues. So we have to see that this is a privilege of people in rich countries who can afford to not have earnings for 2 months, 3 months, or maybe even 6 months. But those who have this luxurious situation or are in this situation, we can think about consuming less biological resources. And this would be my idea of ecological human rights. We know that citizens of Austria, Germany, we consume between 3 and 4 times the share that we would get in a globally just and sustainable distribution. So we are actually taking away the same rights and opportunities, both for people in other countries and for our own children and grandchildren. And the solution to that is that we distribute what Mother Earth, the planet, is offering to mankind, and share it into 8 billion parts. And the 8 billionth part would be the yearly ecological consumption right, or ecological human right for every person. And we could implement it in a form of an ecological purchase power, which would be added to the financial purchase power. And this would be the guarantee that even if all 8 billion humans consume their whole ecological consumption rights, mankind as a whole would still remain within the ecological planetary boundaries. That is one of my proposals. The same here, if we ask governments, are you ready to create per capita consumption and pollution rights, they will very probably say, no, we are not ready because people are not ready. And this is the third learning. They have told us for years they cannot protect the global climate, they cannot do anything against air pollution, they cannot do anything because people are not ready for it. And now with one virus, they force us to give up even our fundamental rights. And even as the virus is not the most dangerous threat to health. In the European Union, for instance, we have sadly to say that 180,000 persons have died with the coronavirus. But every year we have 450,000 deaths in the European Union due to air pollution. And where is the lockdown in order to prevent these deaths? So it's absolutely disproportional what governments are doing, first with the view of different health risks. And second, the same governments, they do everything to prevent us from one health risk, do nothing to prevent us from others. So the lesson is we should not leave these kind of decisions to governments because they're taking bad decisions, obviously. And my proposal, my bet is that if people could vote on ecological human rights, a majority would vote in favor of them because they would understand the bigger picture, and they would understand that it's better and more humane and ethically more sound to leave our children and grandchildren the same rights and opportunities than we found, instead of voting for no, we can exceed and destroy the environment no matter what remains to our children and grandchildren, because that is the state of the art. And we should take a conscious decision on these two options and alternatives. That's the proposal.
Yeah, thank you. I think you just summarized a little bit as well our festival topic, the From Ego to Echo, that it needs the collective us to make the changes, and that we need to find ways to organize the good movements in a good direction. And I also think it's great that you see something that we can learn from the crisis. Also, I differ between this thinking, yes, now the system is on hold, so yes, now we can change it. And sometimes I'm also pessimistic. So also the exchange we're having and we will be having with all the participants is really good. And for the collective movement, maybe still speaking about our current situation, online movements are also increasing. I think there's some benefit of that in this crisis. I mean, in Germany, we had big movements with the Sea Rescue Seebrücke, with big online demonstrations. Can you share your experiences of participating online, organizing yourselves online? Do you see benefits or downsides?
Well, we're making experiences with new formats, webinars everywhere. And all of a sudden, more than 500 people show up. So this is by far more than what we reach with a physical event. On the other hand, the last physical events were held before 200 participants in situ, but they were streamed at the same time, so could reach equally a large audience. So, well, what we do is to think more thoroughly what is more ecological, to travel somewhere and to give a talk, or to make it directly via the internet. I think I see the opportunity. You can more easily reach an international audience like you are doing. And I'm even thinking to give at the Technical University of Berlin an international MOOC on these topics. And this would be the next step of development in my personal way, because instead of being teacher at one university for 30 students, I hope to be able to reach thousands of students all over the world. And that is a huge advantage, which I see. And yeah, let's say thank you to the little coronavirus for that.
But only for that.
Only for that.
Very much only for that. Wow, now I was listening to you so much that I forgot which my next question was going to be, but I found it again. While there are many upsides and we do have these big online demonstrations and the reach that online gives, I feel like in the little organizing communities like our own, but also when we see our friends at Fridays for Future, I see that they are having great difficulties not meeting physically because it's really hard to spread ideas. And in some way, I feel like movements are losing a little bit of momentum due to the coronavirus because everything is kind of frozen in place. And I was wondering if you have any tips or ideas on how we get the momentum back up and how we can use this to kind of as a starting point to get more people afterwards.
Well, I think the lockdown is over in Germany and Austria. I think we can travel from today to Germany freely again. So I think we will be soon back to normal in most aspects of traveling and meeting. Anyway, my most important message for all these burning and important issues, climate change, biodiversity, animal rights, ecological farming, sustainable food, all these issues, we're making very little progress in the current democratic systems, because at the end, our governments and parliaments decide. And they are post-democratic parliaments and governments. I tried to give an argument on that. So what we really should do is think about and develop better democratic practices in order that we can tomorrow decide on a climate protection package. I think this, looking at the example of Germany, the best example. The students went out to the streets. The whole population was behind them. The media were behind them, and then the government is deciding a package that is not even visible without glasses. So because it's so small, how can that be? So it's a total accident and defeat of our democracies. So before working on proposals how to save the climate and to save biodiversity and to stabilize financial markets, I think it's our duty in this moment to work on the deepening, improvement, and further development of our democracies, in order that our parliaments and government, who just are supposed to be our representatives, let us, the sovereign people, sovereign comes from Latin and means to stand above all. The people stand above parliaments and governments, and we should be able to take these fundamental decisions, and then we would have majorities to protect the climate, to protect biodiversity, to switch to 100% organic farming, to sustainable mobility, and of course to an economy for the common good.
Yeah, thank you. I think from all of during your presentation, also during our conversation now, there are so many good examples already. People have had the good ideas. It's on us now to implement them. It's a long way to go, but I also think that us speaking here and knowing that participants all around the world are listening is a great step towards that. So thank you very much for sharing all of that.
Thanks for giving us the time, and I really hope that this will be a good base for next year's festival as well, so that people take the information you gave them, learn them. We will have an economy workshop at the festival, so that topic will definitely come up again.
Yeah, maybe we see you in Greifswald even, or your digital version, depending.
Yeah. Anyway, see you again. Thank you very much, and stay healthy on all levels.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.